The crowd in Dallas was already on its feet when President Donald Trump stepped onto the stage. Flags rippled in the air, cameras flashed, and chants rolled through the arena like thunder. It was a national tribute of veterans, a night dedicated to sacrifice, service, and the quiet courage of those who wear the uniform. Trump adjusted the microphone, preparing to begin his remarks, when a subtle commotion stirred near the front rows. A young woman in a dark blue Air Force uniform was moving forward. Security instinctively stepped toward her, but she raised her hands, her voice calm yet urgent. "Mr. President, I need to speak. Please, it's important." The room fell into a hush. Trump peered into the lights for a moment, studying her face. Then he lifted his hand. Let her speak. It was an unexpected break in protocol, but something in her voice, steady, emotional, resolute, held the room still. She stepped onto the stage. Her name tag read, Lieutenant Reagan Thorne. "I'm sorry to interrupt, sir," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But there's something I need to say, not just to you, but to everyone here." Trump nodded and handed her the microphone. "I'm a pilot," she said. "I've served overseas. I've seen war. But that's not why I'm standing here." The arena was silent now, thousands leaning forward at once. "Today isn't about me. It's about a letter." She held up a weathered envelope, its edges worn soft by time. "This letter was given to me 5 years ago, before my last deployment. It's from someone none of you have heard of, but without him, I wouldn't be standing here." Cameras zoomed in. Even the president watched without moving. His name was Elijah. He was a janitor at our air base. Most people didn't know his name, but he saw me, really saw me when I was at my lowest. Her voice caught. I was 24, fresh out of training, excited but terrified. My father had just died in a crash. He was a pilot too, and I didn't believe I belonged in the cockpit anymore. She pressed the envelope gently against her chest. One night, he found me cry alone in the hangar. He didn't ask for details. He just said, "I don't know what you're facing, but I've seen greatness in broken people. Sometimes that's where the light comes from." She looked down at the envelope. Then he handed me this letter. The air felt heavy with anticipation. I never opened it. I promised myself I'd read it only when I believed I'd made him proud. A long pause. "I think that time is now." She carefully unfolded the paper, as though it were fragile glass. "I've never read this out loud," she admitted, "but I will." Her voice steadied as she began. "Dear Reagan, I see a storm inside you, not one of chaos, but of purpose. You're built to fly, not because the Air Force chose you, but because you chose others. Pain may ground you, but love gives you wings. You're not flying for medals. You're flying for meaning. And that's the difference between being good and being great. When you soar above the clouds, remember those who clean the floors below. You may forget names and faces, but never forget your reason. If you ever doubt it, reread this." Reagan lowered the letter, tears glistening but unshed. "He didn't know me well," she said softly, "but he knew enough." She folded the paper with care. "I carried this through air raids, storms, and lonely nights. It reminded me that invisible people often leave the deepest marks." A beat of silence. "Elijah passed away 2 years ago. He never knew what he did for me. But today, I want the world to know." The applause that followed wasn't explosive. It was heartfelt. It swelled slowly, like a rising tide. When it quieted again, she continued, "I want you to know who I was before he found me, because we celebrate heroes without knowing how broken they once felt." She glanced down at the podium. "After my father's crash, I questioned everything. Was it worth it? Was it safe to keep chasing the sky when it had already taken so much?" Her voice softened. "I would sit alone in the cockpit at night, engine off, staring at the controls, wondering what would feel like to never fly again." She looked toward the president. "Sir, you speak often about strength, but sometimes strength is asking for help. That night in the hangar, I didn't realize it, but I was asking. Elijah didn't wear a uniform. He didn't have medals or rank, but he had wisdom, patience, a quiet strength that saved me." She took a breath. "We don't always recognize angels when they walk among us. Sometimes they wear janitor uniforms. Heads nodded throughout the arena. I made a promise that if I ever stood on a stage like this, I would tell his story. She stepped back. President Trump returned to the microphone, visibly moved. "Folks," he said with a faint smile, "we had a schedule tonight." A soft ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. But some things matter more than schedules. He turned serious. What Lieutenant Thorne just did, that's real courage. Not the kind that earns medals. The kind that lifts people up. He gestured for her to stand beside him. This stage was built to honor veterans. But tonight, it's hers. Reagan gently shook her head. "No, sir," she said quietly. "It's Elijah's." And in that moment, under the bright lights and roaring applause, the story of the janitor became the most powerful tribute of all. Trump nodded slowly, then stepped closer to the edge of the stage and looked out over the sea of faces. "How many of you," he asked, "have someone like Elijah in your life, someone the world overlooks, but who saw something in you when you couldn't see it yourself?" Hands rose across the arena. Veterans, spouses, teenagers, even hardened service members brushed at their eyes. "That," Trump said, his voice steady, "is the heart of this country, not just the people in uniform, but the people who inspire them to wear it." He turned back to Reagan. "Lieutenant Thorne, if you're willing, I'd like to hear more." She searched the crowd. They weren't just watching anymore. They were with her. She nodded. And just like that, the carefully planned program gave way to something no one had expected, a story unfolding in real time. "I wasn't supposed to be a pilot," Reagan began. A quiet murmur drifted through the audience. "I grew up in foster care. My mom left when I was young, and my dad re-enlisted. After that, it was just goodbyes. Different homes, different rules, different last names on mailboxes." The room stilled. People said I was too angry, too stubborn, too much. She smiled faintly. But one teacher told me something I've never forgotten. She said, "Maybe you're not angry. Maybe you're passionate, and no one's taught you how to use it yet." A ripple of soft laughter and nods. She helped me apply to an ROTC program. That's when everything began to shift. Trump listened without interruption. Even after I got into flight school, the doubt didn't disappear. You don't forget the names kids call you in group homes. You don't forget sleeping with your backpack as a pillow because it was the only thing that felt like yours. She held up the letter again. That's why Elijah mattered so much. He didn't know my past, but he saw my worth. Her voice strengthened. "I'm sharing this because someone here is carrying a letter of their own. Maybe not on paper, but in your heart." She looked across the thousands gathered before her. "Pain doesn't define you. Purpose does." Silence settled, thick but reverent. "I'm not telling you this for applause," she continued. "I'm telling you because someone needs to know it's okay to be broken and brave at the same time." She scanned the crowd. "Some of you are veterans. Some are children of those who served. And some of you are fighting battles no one else can see." Her words fell gently, like rain on dry ground. "So let me ask you something," she said. "Who gave you your letter?" Heads lowered. Faces softened. Maybe it was a mother who never let go. A brother who kept calling. A stranger who looked you in the eye when no one else would. She smiled. "If they're still here, thank them. And if they're not, honor them by becoming someone else's letter." The applause rose slowly, not thunderous, but steady and heartfelt. This was no longer politics. It was personal. Trump stepped forward again, his expression reflective. "Lieutenant Thorne," he said gently, "you reminded us of something very American, that greatness wears many faces." He turned to the audience. "Elijah reminds me of someone from my buildings in New York, a porter named Jorge. Didn't speak much English, but every morning he'd say, 'You okay, boss?' Didn't matter who you were." A faint smile crossed his face. And after September 11th, he was the first one back. Said he didn't want the building to feel empty. He paused. "Men like Elijah, men like Jorge, they don't ask for thanks. But they're the foundation everything else stands on." Applause echoed again. "We put medals on chests," Trump continued, "and stars on shoulders. But maybe we should put names like Elijah's on plaques. Maybe it's time we remember the ones who keep our heroes standing." He turned back to Reagan. Your story won't end here. We're going to make sure it reaches every base, every training camp, every school that needs to hear it. Reagan covered her mouth, overwhelmed, but Trump wasn't finished. He stepped aside and spoke quietly into his microphone. Moments later, the massive screen behind him flickered to life. Reagan turned confused. A live feed appeared from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. A group of airmen stood in front of a hangar, holding a large banner that read, "Thank you, Elijah." The camera shifted to a bronze plaque mounted beside the hangar doors. It read, "In honor of Elijah West, a man who helped others fly when they couldn't find their wings." The arena rose to its feet as one. Reagan pressed her hand to her heart, tears streaming freely now. "You told his story," Trump said softly. "We made sure it lives on." She could barely speak. "Thank you," she whispered. "And Lieutenant," he added, reaching into his pocket. "One more thing." He pulled out a small velvet box. "I don't usually do this outside of formal ceremony, but today isn't usual." He opened it. Inside rested a Presidential Medal of Recognition, awarded for extraordinary service and moral leadership, for reminding us what honor really means. Reagan staggered back a step, overwhelmed. For a moment, she dropped to one knee, not in performance, but in pure emotion. Then she stood and accepted the medal, not for herself, for Elijah. The applause this time was powerful, sustained, emotional, unforgettable. When it finally quieted, Reagan lifted the microphone one last time, the medal resting in her palm. "I never dreamed of medals," she said through tears. "I dreamed of not quitting." She looked out over thousands of faces. "And when I felt like quitting, I didn't need a commander." Her voice steadied. "I needed a janitor who saw wings where I only saw wounds." She held up the medal. "This belongs to every Elijah, every Jorge, every unseen soul who keeps someone else standing." She smiled through tears. "And if you're still searching for your letter, maybe it's time to write one for someone else." The arena stood again, not for a president, not for politics, but for something deeper, for the quiet power of being seen. And somewhere in the echo of that applause, a janitor's legacy soared higher than any jet ever could. "A custodian who saw me." Reagan smiled through her tears, steadying her voice. "This isn't just Elijah's story," she said. "It's yours too, because somewhere along your journey, someone lifted you up when no one else noticed you were falling." She paused, drawing a breath. "And I have a message to the people who don't wear uniforms, who don't get saluted, who go home exhausted and unseen." The room was silent. "You matter." Applause swelled again. "Whether you clean floors, teach children, care for the elderly, stock shelves at midnight, or drive buses before sunrise, you are part of someone's flight path. You are the wind beneath someone's wings." President Trump stepped beside her. "That's the America I want to lead," he said simply. Cameras captured the image, a president and a pilot, different paths, united by one quiet truth. Everyone matters. Reagan glanced upward as if whispering into the lights. "We did it. Elijah." As the applause softened, a young soldier near the front stood hesitantly, something clutched in his hand. Trump noticed. "You want to say something, son?" The soldier nodded and approached the stage. "My name is Private First Class Jonah Reed," he said. "I'm from Topeka." His voice wavered. "I lost my mom last year. She was a janitor at my high school, raised me by herself." He looked at Reagan. "Your story reminded me of her. She used to tell me, 'Jonah, it's not about being seen. It's about showing up.'" He swallowed hard. "I never got to thank her properly. But today I feel like I did." Reagan stepped down and wrapped him in an embrace. "You just did," she whispered. And just like that, one story sparked another. When Jonah returned to his seat, Trump approached the microphone again. "America isn't made great by politicians," he said. "It's made great by people like Reagan, like Jonah's mom, like Elijah." He paused and added, "Starting next month, we're launching a new national initiative, the Silent Heroes Fund." The crowd leaned in. "It will honor custodians, nurses, caregivers, teachers, those who serve without recognition." A ripple of surprise moved through the arena. "We'll create scholarships in their names, install plaques in schools and bases, send letters of gratitude from the White House." He turned toward Reagan. "And the first scholarship will be named after Elijah West." The cheers were immediate and heartfelt. Reagan covered her face. Overwhelmed. He gave everything and asked for nothing. Trump continued. "But starting today, his name will help others fly." In the crowd, an elderly woman wearing a faded Air Force pin rose slowly to her feet. A staffer handed her a microphone. "I'm retired Colonel June Laskin," she said, voice steady despite her years. "I served in Vietnam." The arena fell still. I've seen ceremonies. I've seen folded flags. I've buried more friends than I can count. She looked directly at Reagan. "But what you did today, that was a battlefield of the heart. And you won." The standing ovation that followed was thunderous. Colonel Laskin saluted Reagan. Reagan returned the salute, not out of formality, but out of shared understanding. That night, Reagan's story spread across the country. Veterans halls replayed the moment. Social media flooded with tributes under the hashtag #ThankYouElijah. A teacher in Iowa wrote, "Being invisible doesn't mean being unimportant." A gas station worker in Nevada posted a photo of his father in steel-toed boots. No cape, just calloused hands. In a single day, Elijah's quiet life touched millions. Later, alone in her hotel room, Reagan sat with a medal beside her. She unfolded the envelope again. Tucked inside was a second note she had never opened. Elijah's final message, given shortly before his passing. "Reagan, you fly for both of us now. And if you ever think you're falling, remember, you've already carried more than most ever will. Now go make someone else's sky brighter." Tears streamed freely. "I did," she whispered, "and I'm not done." In Washington, President Trump sat quietly in the Oval Office. "That moment with Lieutenant Thorne," he said to his advisors, "was one of the most human moments I've had in years." "Should we prepare a national speech, sir?" one aide asked. Trump shook his head. "No, let America talk this time. We need more stories, fewer speeches." He glanced at a photo of Elijah's plaque resting on his desk. "Let this be the beginning." A month later, in a small town in Kentucky, a teenage girl named Maya opened a letter that changed her life. Inside was a full scholarship, the Elijah West Aviation Grant. Her father was a mechanic. Her mother cleaned office buildings at night. She screamed with joy and ran to the porch to show them. At the bottom of the letter was the president's signature and a handwritten note from Reagan, who had personally selected her essay. A legacy had taken flight. 6 weeks later, Reagan returned to her base, not just as a pilot, but as a mentor. Cadets lined up to meet her. Some asked for advice. Others simply wanted to shake her hand. To each of them, she offered the same words Elijah once gave her. "You're stronger than your darkest day." One cadet asked, "Ma'am, what was the best moment of your service?" Reagan smiled. "The moment I remembered who helped me soar." She later tracked down Elijah's only living relative, his sister, Gloria, in Michigan. Reagan sent her photos of the plaque, the scholarship, the medal. Weeks later, Gloria wrote back, "I always feared my brother would be forgotten, but now the world knows what I always knew. He was a giant in coveralls." Reagan framed the letter and kept it beside her flight badge. On Veterans Day, Reagan stood beside President Trump once again, this time in the White House Rose Garden. Together, they unveiled a memorial wall, not only for fallen soldiers, but for everyday patriots. Names etched into stone. Cafeteria workers, mechanics, delivery drivers, EMTs, each honored not for rank, but for impact. As the crowd looked on, Reagan stepped forward. "We always salute the flag," she said. "But today, we salute the hands that held us up when we couldn't stand." Trump nodded. "This is America." Above them, the flag lifted gently in the breeze. And in that quiet movement, in the echo of applause and the story still unfolding, it felt as though Elijah was flying once more. Not in a cockpit, but in every life he helped lift with nothing more than belief, kindness, and a simple letter.